flushed down with pulses of rainfall, carrying it into the groundwater, and some of them are remediated by a natural what we call natural bioremediation. That is, natural bacteria in the soils that break it down into more harmless components. But yeah, a lot of the water does have some amount of contamination.
Would this be, say, fertilizers?
Fertilizers is one. Fertilizers, which comes primarily from agriculture. There's a lot of nitrate that comes from fertilizer, and it still remains from periods of time when we had orange groves instead of residential areas. And so those nitrates in the soils continue to leak into the aquifers. Now there's something I should add, and that is municipalities are required to provide water that has concentrations of these contaminants below what are called maximum contaminant limits, meaning that, that it doesn't mean that it's zero, but it's at a low enough level that it's not considered to present a health hazard.
So tap water is pretty good to drink?
Yeah, all of the tap water has to meet these, be below these maximum contaminant limits. And what that means is you will get, in many instances, trace concentrations of these contaminants. But as I say, the studies have indicated that those won't create health problems. I should frame that as saying that many of the studies are posed as no more than 1 in 1 million deaths due to exposure. Many of them created by long-term exposure, and contracting some form of cancer due to ingestion.
1 in 1 million?
1 in 1 million.
Okay, that's pretty good odds. I'll take that.
Not too bad, except for the 1 in 1 million, but lower than the expected cancer deaths from the polluted air that we breathe. So not bad, actually.
So what do you think? I would be better off drinking the tap water or digging a well in my backyard and drinking that water?
The tap water, as I say, has met these federal EPA and state drinking water standards.
The aquifers, not so, huh?
First of all, if you dug a well, and depending on where it is dug, it could be an illegal, because these adjudicated basins, new wells are not allowed without permits. So you may not be able to do it unless you do it illegally. But if you did do it, if you didn't test the water, you could not be sure of its quality.
Do you think that most of the contaminants in our aquifers are from anthropomorphic
Anthropogenic?
causes? Yeah.
A lot of them, yes. A lot of them are created by, as I say, leaking underground storage tanks, industrial activities. There are natural contaminants, though, that exist, and some of those include trace elements that are associated with aquifer minerals. And so some of those naturally occurring contaminants exceed drinking water standards, too. So it doesn't matter if they're anthropogenic or natural, the municipalities still have to satisfy these standards, whether that's done by blending or taking some wells that have higher concentrations offline. They have a variety of different management approaches to make sure that drinking water is meeting those mandated standards.
So let's talk about your research. You do test above ground. What do you call that?
Creeks and streams.
Creek water?
Yeah, surface water. I do. Although my training is primarily in groundwater hydrology, I have a tremendous interest in the interactions between surface water and groundwater, and in particular the interactions between rivers and creeks and groundwater aquifers. So these are coupled systems, and one issue that affects one part of the system will affect the other because they're conjoined, they're interactive. So if you pull water out of a creek, that may cause groundwater to seep at a higher rate into the creek, and so you'll get, increase the amount of interaction between the two. Or if you pull water out of a creek, it may reduce the amount of recharge to an aquifer. So these are very much interactive systems, and so I look at the interactions between the two. But I do and have a real interest and love of the study of water quality and creeks and rivers and the riparian habitat that those waters sustain.
How are we doing in California, Southern California?
In terms of?
In terms of our creeks and rivers?
Well, varies. There are many different entities, some nonprofit groups that are working to improve quality in our creeks and rivers. As you know, though, a lot of our creeks and rivers, the main ones in particular, the Los Angeles River, for example, in the 30s, they were basically, let's say, converted to flood control channels. And now, and the idea was, let's build up to these creeks, get rid of all the native vegetation, channelize the system so they don't meander and occupy a wide floodplain, and let's put in these concrete channels so that floodwaters are routed quickly from urban areas out to the ocean. And that was kind of the mindset in the 30s and 40s. And unfortunately, what happened as a result of that kind of development is what we have now are these kind of sterile concrete lined channels that don't support very vital habitat, and you know, certainly that has affected the quality of our lives in terms of having recreational space and areas where we can enjoy nature. There are entities who are trying to do restoration of these channels in places, remove the concrete lining, put wetlands in and riparian vegetation. But there are various barriers to doing that. It's very expensive. There are regulatory issues regarding flooding. So it's a difficult activity.
So do you think that the LA River will ever be anything but this concrete channel?
Well, I'm not as involved in some of the issues that some of the entities are in trying to do some restoration in parts. I think it's going to be very difficult to remove the concrete lined LA river channel, but what they're trying to do is develop green belts and other types of recreational ballparks, other types of areas where we do have recreation, and these are in many cases where we had industries or railroad yards and the like. And what, you know, as these as lands are bought from these industries, either they're shutting down or the economy of scale is such that it's you know, money can be raised to develop these recreational areas. What they're doing is they're developing side areas near the channels where they're starting to put in wetlands and ballparks and green belts and the like that will allow some overflow from the channel to be routed through it and will improve water quality while providing recreation and habitat. So there'll be, you know, some impacts and some improvements if recreation and riparian areas is your thing.
We don't really have any fish in the LA River.
There are fish. There
in
are
the
actually,
LA River?
Yeah, there are. Especially out near Long Beach, there are people who will do some fishing. I don't know, and you know, I'm not a biologist, but you know, people do fishing out near Long Beach, near the mouth of the LA River. But for the most part, no, there isn't really much going with respect to fish, at least not that I'm aware of, especially in the areas, you know, well above Long Beach.
So about getting back to your research, can we drink from the rivers out here in the streams?
Oh, that's an interesting question, and you mentioned that you frequently do so yourself when you're hiking around. I don't recommend it.
Have you found a lot of impurities, harmful?
Yes, some. My work, you know, on the rivers and creeks often has an ecological overtone, meaning that we're looking at the water quality not from the perspective of its impacts to humans from drinking, but more about, is that water suitable for the ecology, the aquatic species that inhabit those creeks and streams.